Hello, everybody. See my new stretchy mask? Well, welcome. I've been thinking of this night a while. I have probably too much to say. Maybe I should keep the mask on. Um, Here's some of the thoughts. I was thinking a year ago, November 3rd, 2019, there were no masks. No one was thinking of coronavirus. No one was thinking about really election. No one was dealing with shutdowns or all the stresses. Probably our health as a nation was better. I mean, general health. Like, I think people's blood pressures have gone up. Sorry about jumping there. Um, there's just been a lot going on. Things are different. And we just live in a different world. How do we cope with this? Well, I think the tools for living are the same. I mean, and and God is the same, so we can still go out to God for help. Um, so tonight is the election. Here are some things to consider, some tips. I think it's okay to feel the feelings of disappointment. Say, like, you're disappointed with the results. I think some of us who might get the candidate that we're choosing might not actually feel gleefully happy, but maybe just more relieved, maybe, that we don't have the other side. I thought for us to heal as people, we don't really, well, this is what my plan is. I don't think there's any place for gloating or feeling satisfied that our side won. I think I love what the AA book says, and I've shared this before. It says, as in war, the victor only seems to win. So this is not a winning per se. This is about a necessary thing to take place for us to have some kind of leaders for our nation. And so to do this, we have our vote. So I was grateful that we are in a country where we do have our vote. I got to vote and got to share my little voice to lead the rest to God. I do believe that one approach in this world is to see that an unknown future. In one of my videos, it's called The Unknown Future. It's an equation, and you have an unknown future as the denominator. That's what we all have. We all have this unknown future. We don't know. I don't even know what the next hour looks like, or the next year looks like, or the next 5 years. So how do I live with that tension? Well, if I'm in control, trying to control, it's going to equal anxiety. There's no way around it. And that's why I think our tendency is, I got to know the results. I've got to worry about the results, or just false attempts to try to have control over an uncontrollable situation. If I surrender, put on the numerator here, surrender and let go, trust in God, trust in a power greater than ourselves, we're going to be okay. And if we really believe this in our heart of hearts, we're probably going to have a mild, peaceful response to however it turns out. We could do all the right things and say, like, we gloss over that. Here's the therapist talking in me, is that I think if we don't feel the feelings, process maybe anger, frustration, fears, we stuff them, we could not do ourselves a disservice. We could have some anger or resentment seeping out. So we need to process those. I do like the tool of expressive writing. Just write out your feelings about anything that comes to mind and try to think of it as detox, letting go of those things. And then you shred it, you tear it up. You do not reread it or hold on to it. I mean, if there's something really precious, then you could segment that out and rewrite it. But for most of us, it's just getting the initial feelings out. Um, I thought about young people, and I love young people. I have a lot of respect for young people. I'm working with people in their 20s, in their 30s, and I'm making myself feel old. It's funny. Here's a thought is that when you haven't seen many elections or things in life, maybe catastrophes or things, you don't know how things will turn out, and that unknown future gets even scarier. But if you've been through, and let's pretend I'm talking about my grandparents who went through depressions, 2 world wars, heart surgeries, lung surgeries, back surgeries. Um, they saw elections come and go, and they've been through a couple of scandals and all in terms of politicians and all that drama. Yeah, think about what they went through. They would be less alarmed today. They're just because they have this reservoir of wisdom that it's going to turn out in the end. And it's not the end of the world. But if I'm 15 or 16 and I'm looking at this, I've had maybe 15 years of a good life, and then all of a sudden schools are shut down. I don't have any friends because I can't really see them do anything. My sports just went right out the window. Um, and then I'm seeing riots in the street. I'm worried about an economy. Going to get a job at even a fast food restaurant is daunting. Will I get the virus? It's just scary. And what I tell them is like, there are really no mistakes here. Um, God, if they may not believe in God, but if they do, it's like God has allowed you to live in such a time as this. And same thing with us. He has allowed us to live during this time. And He's not going to give us everything we need to be able to successfully live through it. I just don't believe that. And even if there was no external events, I believe this just about life, that if some people have so many crosses to bear, such difficulties, He's not going to not give them what they need to be able to do that. In fact, it was kind of scary for me to look at some people who lost 7 loved ones in period of 7 years, or the man and the woman both got cancer, or I mean, just horrific stuff. You go, this doesn't seem right. But it's like I'm not to live their life and they aren't to live my life. And it seems odd that I may have some tools that helps them, even though they're a hero in my mind of how do they do this, the pain, the suffering. And I did feel like, well, if I were in the same camp, then I would have a hard time being able to help them. I've had my own pain and suffering camp, but not like theirs. But, um, empathizing, with them seems to help. I do believe that other things to consider during, whatever things turn out is we're going to need patience. We're going to need to be able to not get immediate results. We get to choose how often we're going to check the media to see if something has changed one way or another. I am hopeful that maybe more people are going to have a moderate response to any upsetting things. That while in the summer more people might have lost their tempers or got upset or protesting or riots, etc., that maybe when something is big enough, we realize this is not the time to overreact. And I'm not saying all those people were overreacting. I think some protesting needed to be done. But I am not a fan of violence and opportunists to come in and take advantage of something, and just basically law breaking. Um, But I think that um, what would it be like if we use the metaphor, and I've been using this a while, of the dysfunctional family, the mom and dad are in the middle of a divorce. And I've been using, one who's very heart oriented, concerned about the poor, concerned about um, the weaknesses. And then the other one that's more like, come on, let's not be victims, let's work hard. Mom and dad may be so polarized, but if they actually hate each other, they vilify each other to the point where they can't even see clearly about that parent who they once fell in love with. Their common love is their children, but they so hate each other. And then they actually have attorneys, and some attorneys may be mad at this, but I think I can handle this. Some attorneys come in and scare them, fear mongering, saying, look, you got to watch out for your rights. He could take over the rights of the children, or he did this, this, and this, or she could do this and this. She could take you for all the money. But Ham says now they make a ton of money off of these people's fears. And now you end up with a stalemate. They can't even talk with each other and sort anything out. Let's say that the attorneys are like the media in this case, which has then created a bigger divide, saying things that might not even be true about the other side. So the election day is kind of like court date. I don't know what it's like, thankfully, to be in this situation, but when I was a guardian ad litem, I would be there for court, or I've gone to court many times or walked through the court experience many times with people. And here, you don't get to decide where your child's going to live. The court steps in because you've invited them in because you so cannot get along that now you've lost power over your own family, even though it's divided. And the court will tell you what's going to happen. And all you can do is argue your case, and then the judge will decide what's going to happen. And if you think about it, that's pretty primitive. It's pretty sad. And that's why they're heartbreaking things. But if we can gain some wisdom from that, we could go, so today is court day. We're going to see who's going to win, who gets the children. No one walks away winning. It's more like they feel sad now. The kids don't really win. They're not saying, wow, I love it that I only get to see dad every other weekend, and I'm happy that the abusive dad who's been abusing me is now having to go to anger management, or mom has been fighting over, child support money, and now we get it. I mean, no one is thrilled about an outcome. They're more like relieved, maybe, and the other one walks away sad, and that sadness is still harming the family. That it's really, really sad. So there's going to be a lot of sad people in our country tonight and tomorrow and the following days to come. There's probably going to be a few people, assuming that they're, well, I don't want to be judgmental, but I think it needs to be said, is that there's going to be possibly some gloating, hopefully not a lot, or gleefully thinking they're winning, at least for 4 years, if that. I mean, there's another election 2 years from now. But I think in a positive way, maybe most of us will see that elections may not heal our country. I think they're necessary. But how can we heal our country? How can we get along better with each other? It's the same principle as living a life with the people I'm around. I have to be patient, tolerant, kind. I need to be forbearing and able to have tolerance for differing opinions and to work towards a common good. And if we have really varying opinions of what that common good is, try to find the subsets somewhere in there where there is some connection. I think most people want to feel safe. Most people want to have a country to live in where there's some kind of rules and laws. I think most people want to be able to own some possessions. Some people want to be able to have a job that they find fulfilling. I think most people want health care, good roads, libraries, entertainment, freedom, and liberty. I think that's kind of what America's built on. I had this thought that even if America dissolved, okay, I'll admit some of these assaultive thoughts got me thinking, well, what if there is no more America? Then what? Say like we just assume America will always be here for us. And that's actually kind of short-sighted. There are countries that cease to exist. We're only about 200 and I think 80 or 200, well, 200, well, I'm doing my math, 250 years maybe old. That's not old by compared to other countries' standards. So this is the good news. So in the midst of this, and it's like it's best to just ignore such thoughts, but I think it's helpful to see that it'd be like saying I might have no family anymore. So I should be so grateful that I have family, and I should try to do everything I can to connect with my fellow Americans. Here's the good news, and this was, I think, a good thought given to me. The idea of America is already out. The idea that we based our country on a document, a constitution based on freedoms and rights of the people, and that we can have a voice. I'm going to get teary-eyed here. We can have a voice. We can elect people, and we can have to pursue happiness, we can, and I'm not saying it was a perfect document and that it was always right, but what America is more of this land of opportunity that we don't really have a caste system. I'm not saying there's no problems with caste or class or race, but for the most part, we really aren't big on caste systems like other countries have had history of this. We had individual states which were based on freedom of religion, or they came and settled. And even I've watched some documentaries and taken a couple of history courses, is that to unify these states, even to fight against Britain for our freedom, took some doing, and they argued, and some people wanted to do this, some people didn't. That's kind of where we are today anyway. So praying for unity, praying for tolerance, and looking for the highest good and long term, not just short term fix. Praying God's will and the power to carry it out. I mean, I thought, well, maybe a number of people don't like America enough. I don't want to be political enough, but I think they don't like America. Maybe they start their own country, and maybe they take a part of America and live there. That seems really odd, but that may be what happens if they the idea of a vote is that it implies someone's not going to get what they want, but they understand that that's how voting works, is that you then submit to for the sake of unity. It's like this is made up, but say like I have friends and we all can't agree on where to go to dinner, we just take a vote. If the vote is it's Thai food, and 3 people say, well, I'm not doing that, well, then they leave. Okay, well, so much for a vote. So that's kind of what happened, in my humble opinion, in the last election, is that, if you don't get what you want, then you just drop out and say, well, that's not fair and I'm not doing it anymore. Well, then that's, so I think that if we pray for maturity, pray for us to be able to most graciously um, deal with the outcome and to realize this is what America is. So, on a practical note, couple of things. If you get news you don't like, it will look better the next morning or the next morning after that or the next morning after that. I've had some news that I didn't particularly like this week, but it's like once you live long enough, you go, you know what? I'm not going to let this unsettling news ruin my life. Two, that how much do I want to let this be part of my life? On a practical note, it has some connection. But we may be too involved with the things of this world, or I'm sounding Christianity here, but I thought of the verse, render to Caesar's what is Caesar's. Here we have a nice word. So Curvin says, in regards to the political turmoil, Acts 8:39, where the Ethiopian, I think that's Philip, had joy, the apostle Philip, and the Ethiopian eunuch had joy in his soul after he was set free in Christ. I'd like to think he found joy in carrying the gospel to his countrymen back home. We need to do the same. Yeah, there is this sense that the gospel transcends politics. And I was pondering this to prepare for this. Like Peter, well, let's talk about the Ethiopian and Philip. Ethiopia has deep Christian roots that go all the way back to the apostle Philip. That I think he was the Ethiopian eunuch for Candace the queen. He just shares the gospel, like just right there as they're traveling. And I always picture them on a buggy. Maybe they weren't on a buggy, but it feels like they were in some kind of device. But then he says, well, there's some water. Can I be baptized? What's stopping me to be baptized? So he's baptized right there on the spot. And there's probably more story there to read in church history. I'm always taken by one day you think you're going to be doing something, and now all of a sudden you're connected with Christ, and now you're sharing with your countrymen something that changes their whole country. So God acts inside the world in terms of country. Like there were kings, like is it Vladimir in Russia, who I think it's 900s, maybe earlier. The apostle Andrew made it up to Kiev. I think that's Ukraine today, but it wasn't called anything there that today. But I think it was Vladimir felt this need to have God in his life or a religion. And I think it was deep-seated hunger. And they sent emissaries to numerous places to find different religions. And when they went to Constantinople in Hagia Sophia, so this had to be maybe 900s, he says, we didn't even know whether we were in heaven or earth, that it was so heavenly, the worship. And so that's how God came to them. And then Russian Orthodox for years was that until the communists, um, you know, destroyed that for about 70 years, but didn't obliterate it because now it's sprung back by leaps and bounds. So, yeah, God interacts with us at a national level as well as individual. But I think that when something is too traumatic on the outside, it's okay to kind of go inward. I have this idea of concentric circles where we just naturally, if something's too big for us to handle here, we move to the circle. So out here could be the world of politics, our community, our nation, our state. There's that outer circle. I should make a real handout on this. The next level is the community in which we live. Like I live in Lake Stevens. And I have more choice there. I mean, I can influence it more there. The next level is my friends, my church, people I would call friends. And then in there is probably my family. But then right in here is myself. And there is a sense that while I'm connected to everybody and I have help from everybody, and the teaching is we need people, there seems to be a situation where it's just me and God, that I'm just going to be alone with him and there's nothing I can do except be alone with him. Perhaps that's where we're going to find some peace during these difficult times, is just to go to God on our knees and say, God, please help me. Help me to be the person you want me to be. Give me exactly the tools, the energy, the strength to help me to do your holy will. And that's the same prayer we should always pray, whether there's an election or not, whether there's a hurricane or not, or we have great times. In fact, you can make an argument that during difficult times, we tend to do better spiritually than when everything is the way we want it. And this sounds really weird, but I might be more peaceful as a person when I'm going through a hardship than when I'm getting everything I want and my latte isn't hot enough, and then I just kind of get worse. Selfishness. So I think it's good to take a break from everything, go to the lonely places to pray and to sort things out. I would do enough of that so that you do sleep, so that you do eat, so that you respond, not react, but respond moderately to all this. That, like Mr. Rogers says, we look for the helpers in times of difficulty. And I thought that was such odd advice, but his mother told that to him during periods of crisis. So then people would call him. NPR radio hosts would call Mr. Rogers when there were tragedies and say, Mr. Rogers, what would you tell the children? He would say, my mother told me to look for the helpers. And I found that to be true. Well, first of all, the great helper is God. But who are the people in my life that will help me through the crisis? And of course, who can I help through the crisis at hand? If I look at all the, quote, bad people, whoever they are, that will take me down a certain path. If I look for all the people who are helpful, it takes me down another path. I see the frontline workers during the pandemic. I see the politicians who are truly trying to make a difference. I see the media people who are trying to make a difference and to be helpful. I see family members in my own life who are just trying to be helpful, just trying to give encouragement in a time. I see the pastors and priests and just ministers who are trying to help. I think that's a useful tool. This is all random, sorry, but it's been a busy week. Just like last time, applying the last election, there might have been things that we were fed that might not come true. There was a lot of things said about President Trump that Yeah, I'll just say some of them that people are going to be put in prison camps. The it was be the end of the world. Um, oh, what else was there? World War III, all that stuff. And well, I'm just telling the truth. In my experience, it didn't happen. Um, yeah. So if we find ourselves disappointed with the election results, and we were told by either candidate that this, and this would happen if I don't get elected, I think we should just ask ourselves, God's in control. I don't need to buy into the catastrophic thinking that we were sold, that it's all going to go to hell because of this, and this. In fact, um, oh yeah. So I'm switching back to. Um, hmm, It'll come to me. It's a little bit random tonight. Yeah, ways to take care of herself. Um, Maybe it was this idea that we think something's going to happen. But once we come out of this disappointment or the trance of election, 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 or polarizing opposites, we realize people are people. We need to just get back to our business at hand, and carry on, and be mindful and prayerful. Um, I think that a lot of this is distraction to what really matters in life. Um, I do kind of believe this, and I'm sharing a lot of opinions tonight, that whatever way it turns out, our problems aren't solved. I mean, we still have problems as a nation. And so I think focusing on that is really important, to focus on solutions there. Um, yeah, yeah. And I think somewhat it's the candidates. I guess I can say fault if they were each different kinds of people. Say, like, we had two candidates that were pretty likable, closer in terms of their opinions, it'd be an easier going race. But so some of it's that, some of it is us, that we might want different things. And that's why staying away from polarizing things and saying negative things on Facebook. I have a feeling that most Americans have had enough in terms of the, the negativity, the fighting. Oh, to use the metaphor of the parents, so say like court happens, and then they realize little Tommy and Susie are sick to their stomach. They got the verdict of you're going to live here and this is going to happen, and now they get sick. They come to a therapist and they realize to fight this legally would not have helped them anyway. They need to work together as a team. And so I have a lot of stiff arming of them trying to put down the other. It's like, nope, nope, we're not putting down the other. And I'm pretty tough. In fact, I've never been so tough as a therapist where it's like, can I be this tough? But I say things like, if you love your children, you will stop. But he's or she, no, I don't want to hear it. All you were doing is damaging your children by putting down the other parent who your children love. And I'd say maybe 10 to 20% will buy into that. I really care about the children and I really don't care too much about what the parents want or needs. Then they become very sold on the idea of therapy. We do therapy with the children to ask them what their needs and wants are. And when the parents just hear unbiased information from what little Tommy said, because it's quotes, they start to work together. They don't have to even like each other, but they start to work together. They start to realize this problem is not going to go away. And worse, at 18 or 28 years old, what are they going to say about you? The parent who is most forbearing with the other parent is probably the parent who will win. I don't like that word, but they will have the listening ear, and they will spend more time with that parent. They really will. they will enjoy that parent. And I think if we use the same metaphor to realize, um, yeah, we want to be um, kind-hearted and forbearing and patient. So, yeah. Anybody have any questions out there? Um, and they don't have to be on the topic of the election either. They could be on other topics of getting better. Oh, while someone's thinking of something, here's the other thing I was going to share. It's called the emotional yardstick. And the emotional yardstick really is more like a metric stick. I'm looking for one here, I don't. But a yardstick is technically 1 foot, 2, and 3, and it's right there. But if you think of a meter stick of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and what you do is you rate how bad your situation is. When we're in a not good place, we often rate it really high. We just do. We just go, this is awful what the doctor told me, or this is awful what my son did, or my daughter news about this. We go, it's like an 8 or it's a 9. A kid that's really afraid to go to school, and it's like, well, let's do the emotional yardstick. It's 9, okay. So then it's like, so where would you rate, one of your parents dying? Well, then they kind of go, huh, a 10? Then they realize, wow, I've got to push this down here. Um, Say like they're really afraid to get a job, just really petrified, I can't do this. But compare it to fighting cancer or having to live in a refugee camp. People go, well, wait a minute. If we had to live in a refugee camp, I might be braver. And I think I am. People just would, they would just adapt. So then asking someone, would you hire me? And could I have an application become small? So it's a very interesting technique. Um, and most of the time, people overestimate how bad something is. They just do. So election results, same kind of thing. If you rate it and this is catastrophic, okay. Then look at other things in your life and go, wait a minute, there's much more difficult things than this. Yeah. So, I think the other thing is to really focus on what's in our control and what's not in our control. We've been focusing on the serenity prayer. Um, and I've shared this in past live streams, but politics is God's business. And people go, really? Well, I have a vote. Yeah, a vote of 1 in millions. So I have a small little tiny part in it. But the reality is, God can guide the rulers. They can have a sickness and then they're no longer with us, or He can do all kinds of things. So we put in our vote and then we let go of the process. Same thing with a community effort. Say, like, I can only do so much to help the community, but if a cyclone comes and wipes out all the hard work we've done, we just have to relax and say, well, I guess that's part of um, life, that you just can't make things happen. You can only let them happen. Um, and it's funny. There's certain things that will weave into my thought processes, and then it goes away. I'll go to Curvin's question here. How do you relate to people who are polarized by the political turmoil? In my opinion, a contributing factor is unthankfulness. Yeah, yeah. Um, well, yeah. Um, what's interesting is that I work with all groups of people, and so someone may come in, their family is devastated by certain things. Dad doesn't have a job, mom might be fighting cancer. I mean, it's just like horrific. Then you have another family come in, and the kid's mad because he's done this, this, and this, and he's grounded from his cell phone. And it's like, clearly there's different levels of need and trauma here. And both could be thankful for what they have, but you feel as a person saying, look, I just talked to this family, which is struggling so much, and you're so upset by this. This is nothing. So it seems to be a lack of gratitude, but therapists don't do that because it doesn't work. But I think cultivating gratefulness. I think this is in the realm of mental health, and okay to talk about it, feels political to say, but here's a thought. And I think there's lots of examples to bear witness to this, that how do you sell? Well, if people are taught to not be grateful for what they have, and maybe they don't want to work hard for it, there's a sense of entitlement for it. And then there's a narrative around that. And some of it is true, some of it isn't true, maybe. Then it's the beginning of it's not fair. And I've heard people say, well, it's just clearly not fair. I see other people in life don't ask that question. They had clearly things that were not fair, but they rose up out of the ashes from their drug addicted parents. They decided to get a job, work hard, and have a lot to show for it. In some ways, worse than or more than I have to show for myself. I'm one of those that I did indulge in some kind of self pity, especially as a child. It just made me miserable. Somewhere I snapped and said, being a victim is not going to help things here, because a victim implies there's nothing I can do. It's out of my control. And so, no, I think that, and it's weird. I think that we all of us could be deceived, and we could be marching down literally a path where it's not fair. And so we feel justified in looting or rioting because we have all this anger. And then what happens is we don't realize that the other path is to, well, fight the system in a legal way, get a job, do something more productive rather than just take what isn't yours. And then if you have people enable such behaviors, and this is back to this metaphorical mom and dad where Tommy does something really inappropriate, he shoplifts. And rather than focus on that, well, you took something that was not yours and there's consequences, and mom and dad agreed on that, well, then it solves itself. Tommy goes back to the store, apologizes, he may turn himself in, there's no loophole. But if one says, well, clearly this is wrong, and the other one says, you know what, that's not fair. You work so much, you're never home, and he's just doing this to get attention. And especially if they had a history of shoplifting, then it's somehow justified. And so I think that's what you just have differing of opinions of seeing this. And I do think that it's important to understand that some people have been through an awful lot and they need that tender, compassionate approach and empathy. But I personally draw the line where it has to do with victim mentality, because victim mentality, mental health wise, makes things worse. And am I prideful in saying this? Well, I'll say this. I'm busy as a therapist. I've been doing this 30 years. To have the approach that I'm using is working for a lot of people. And maybe the people that want me to help them with their victim mentality, um, just go somewhere else. Maybe they're successful doing that. But the victim mentality is pretty powerful. For instance, I had a friend who was into ADD. It was ADD this, ADD that. Her daughter had ADD. She's a therapist. And she would say during any consult, well, they have that because they can't do that because they have ADD. Okay, so when does the ADD stop? I mean, so the person's never going to learn to pay bills on time, never learn to be respectful in class because they have ADD. And I just think that's ridiculous. That if you tell people you can't do something, and you keep on telling them that, and then you blame a whole set of other people for that reason, it would be, well, and this happens. And I think if you see it in other contexts, you can maybe know where I'm going with this. But if you blame the teacher, it's the teacher's fault because she or he is not teaching you the way you need to be. Well, there's some truth to that. But the problem is, when are people going to take responsibility for their own actions? And this is their ability to respond. And I think the people that survive life-threatening illness, no, they're not victims. Jesus certainly was not a victim of abuse from the Pharisees. Yes, he suffered abuse, but he did not take it as an abuse in terms of victim mentality. I think victim mentality is deadly, and I think it makes people worse. And I'm trying to bring unity, but I had a person, I need to keep it very loose, but she kept getting into sexual trouble with boys, and it was quite serious. And that I'll just say her physical health could have had challenges, and parents didn't know about this, and she was underage. So the judgment was, do I report this to CPS? Because she didn't want this to be told, and under state laws, you can't tell the parents of a certain age. But clearly she needs help. So I was talking to the CPS worker, who said, and I said, look, in all honesty, she has a part in this because she dresses a certain way, and I'm not trying to put her down. And the woman said, well, Erik, you got to be careful. You're getting close to victim blaming. And it's like it took me for surprise. Now, here's the problem is, but if the person keeps on having this happen over and over and over to them, how is the person going to solve this situation? By trying to rearrange all of society not to victim blame and trying to get the person not to victimize them? Or do you work with the person who keeps on having these bad, unfortunate experiences, teaching them how not to be a victim anymore? I can tell you this, that there are women I know that went from victimizing, took a self-defense class, which was incredible because the class really taught them how to deal with the biggest fears they had during their abuse, often sexual abuse, and work through that fear to turn it into healthy anger, to where then they learn how to learn these moves to protect themselves. Well, they walked away free, not only knowing how to do self-defense, but no chip on their shoulder, but knowing how to say, don't mess with me. And that's, I think, coming full circle to America. America was built on these freedoms to believe what we want to believe, to say what we want to say, to be able to protect ourselves if we need to from our own government. That's actually why the Second Rights Amendment was given, is that it was a novel idea that people could have the right to defend themselves. And years ago, I worked with a police officer who it was funny. He was a conservative Christian police officer, and I made the mistake of saying, well, it's great that we have police to protect us. And he laughed. He says, no, Erik, no. in the state of Washington, your duty and your right is to protect yourself. We can't protect all of you. We're here to do law and order. And it's like, whoa. It just dawned on me that that's actually why we have these civil rights, to protect our rights. And maybe there's a society before America where there were no rights. And I've had friends from other countries where they just don't have that built into them, those sense of rights. Here I am, I'm born in America. I'm born with this. And maybe from other cultures, they see me as kind of selfish, but I'm born with this feeling that I could say what I want to say. And I should be polite about that and kind. But I've had friends from communist countries that go, you just say that. So, like, they were so raised to just not to speak their mind and to defend myself and to have the opportunity to try to make the living I want to make. If I want to make a lot of money, not that greed is where it's at, but I could probably do that. Now, I do understand, I think I'm balancing it out, that my parents helped me a lot. They really did. And how did they get some of those monies? By slaving away, not trying to spend it all. I think I spend more money than they do. And their parents, I was pondering this, my grandparents came from Sweden. And they escaped from that. They did not, that was not the place for them to be. And they were so poor in West Seattle that they didn't even have a place to live, taken to a home for someone else, a Catholic home, because the state stepped in because there wasn't enough money. Did not understand this till I was an adult, and it really helped me understand my grandparents and how they were so fearful of leaving their home. And also, they wanted to make sure we had enough food to eat and enough clothing. That's why we got clothes from them for Christmas. Like, where's the toys? It helped me understand my dad better, and that my dad, well, it just helped me understand that's where they came from. Interestingly enough, they had no sense of victimize. They dug ditches to put in a gas tank for a gas station. My grandfather built 5 homes in West Seattle. He was taking care of other family members who were too sick during the Great Depression. He just continued to work. He was an amazing man. He was so American. He would stand up during any TV show or ball game where put his hand on his heart and start crying when the national anthem was played. So I have no idea what it would be like for him to came over through Ellis Island as a 16-year-old. And so he just wasn't afraid of making mistakes. Yeah. Now, would they scream and yell about politics? They were, and I didn't follow any of it. And some of it was wacky. I mean, they really believed some wacky things, and people would roll their eyes. And yeah, now I understand some of that because things are a little bit wacky. I guess I grew up in the 60s and 70s. So we have here, the victim stance is a powerful one. The victim is always morally right, neither responsible nor accountable, and forever entitled to sympathy. Not sure who the quote is attributed to. Nice quote. And here's the thing, in this triangle, you have a victim, you have an abuser, and you have a rescuer. This is the Karpman triangle. And any position is not healthy. And we might have talked about this before. So a rescuer, to come in and rescue people, CPS worker, bless their heart, is kind of a rescuer, just sees people as victims. And I had a therapist who taught a course. He said, look, and well, by the way, he started out the seminar. It was called Compassion Fatigue. And dramatic, but he was just a real person. He said, look, I had a gun in my mouth and I was ready to kill myself. And he said, I had a successful practice, but here I was not doing well. And he talked about his own compassion fatigue, his own struggles with his childhood issues, which then he kind of sublimated, and then it came to a bubbling head here. But great seminar, probably one of the best things on self-care. But he said, yeah, actually, this is good to share. So maybe I shared this before, but we're at the airport. I'll make it a shorter story. We're at the airport near where the training is. He says, are we safe? And a room full of 50, 60 people, and we greeted each other in a novel way. And so we kind of knew each other at least for an hour. But he says, are we safe? I said, we also, like, what do you mean we're safe? And so people said, well, a plane could crash in here, or someone could have a sickness, or someone could have a heart attack. He let us go on about 5-10 minutes discussing, are we safe? And he said, okay, I'm here to tell you we're all perfectly safe. Not one of the things you mentioned has happened yet. Right now, everybody in this room is breathing. No one has a cold that we know of. Yeah, no, we're safe. He says we so live in a catastrophic world that we just make ourselves not safe. He says, look, there's only two victims. A dead body and a child could be a victim of something. But if you're an adult, you don't need to be a victim. Yeah, and it's a good way to think. And rescuing, if we try to rescue victims, it makes them more a victim. And I think that's where people don't necessarily understand that approach to helping people, that they're still keeping them a victim. I think we should have compassion and helping people take baby steps and to help them. And I think no matter what we do, some people want to be victims. So this, you can't really fix that. But I know a lot of people I've seen online that lived a life being helped by the government, where then they change and realize I was just being a victim. And they are 10 times happier now, being self-supporting, taking care of their own needs by God's grace. So, God willing, I will be here next week. I might be here doing this again if we feel the need for that. But it's been a pleasure. You guys stay safe. And I guess I'll end with this. God bless America. Take care.